Hi, everybody. Today is October the 25th, 2021. You're watching a Yakima Herald-Republic Editorial Board meeting with one of the candidates for position 2 on the Yakima School Board. Ryan Beckett, who attended Yakima Public Schools and Central Washington University, has been a realtor in the Yakima Valley for nearly 25 years. He served on the Yakima Schools Foundation Board as well as a number of other community organizations. His opponent, incumbent Donald Joseph Davis Jr., has not responded to invitations to participate in this interview. I'm John Taylor, the Yakima Herald-Republic's opinion page editor, and we have another member of our editorial board here, city editor Joanna Markell. So, welcome, Mr. Beckett, and would you like to say anything about yourself that we neglected to mention?
Thank you, John. That was a nice introduction and is fine by me. So we can go ahead and just get started if you'd like to. I appreciate that very much.
Okay. The pandemic, first question. The pandemic's obviously been a nightmare for students, teachers, and parents. Assuming we get things back to somewhere near normal the next year, where does the district go from here? Will the district's strategic plan make sure Yakima kids aren't left behind?
Well, ideally, you would be able to say yes. That's difficult to know for sure. I think that in general terms, the district made the right call when they did to close down and go to an at-home instruction, remote instruction model. They were very cautious and were one of the last districts to come back into play with in-person instruction, which I think is a shame, but it's the way it went and it's the way they played it, and that's fine. On the bright side, the investments and the upgrades that have been made to being able to conduct remote education are fabulous. The hotspots that have been placed around town and the ability to get kids checking out laptops to be able to utilize remote education is an amazing investment that we can't really look back on. And I think that whether we're looking at natural disasters or healthcare scares or even something as simple as a snow day, the investments we've made with remote education are going to pay off in the long term and really be very helpful. I think it's important that we continually focus on teacher training as far as using remote education as a tool so that they're as comfortable with it as possible. But at the end of the day, we have to focus and prioritize in-person, in-class instruction to really be on top of kids' academic improvement. The strategic plan, the roadmap to success that our district has had and has evolved with over the last 20 years that I've been paying attention is really well thought out and is very comprehensive. And I have to trust that at the end of the day, we'll be able to use the plan, work the plan, and be able to make the improvements that we want to make, and hopefully do the catch-up work that is going to need to be done. So many students are kind of in that same boat, and it's going to take a long time to work on that and really assess how our kids are doing, where they're really at right now. What we think might be the case may not really be the case. So that's going to be a long-term scenario for analysis. But I'd love to be optimistic and say that we'll all catch up. But the truth is, it just remains to be seen.
All right. What are the district's most pressing capital needs, and how would you address them during your term?
Well, from what I've heard recently, I know there are some long-term plans that we really need to think about in terms of our elementary facilities. There are a few of them that are still original to the 50s and 60s, and size and scope is probably not necessarily appropriate for modern era education. I think that's a big question we're going to have to look at down the road. If we're really talking about the capital needs of the district, I think we have a lot of land. I think land is an okay scenario. It's going to be really about buildings, and then I would love to see us get to a point where we're able to take a 21st century approach and utilize our facilities more than we are utilizing them now, whether that's utilizing a modified year-round calendar or equipping certain buildings with night school options. I just think there's a lot of opportunities for how we can deliver education opportunity in our community. And, the pandemic has certainly kind of proven that, when you put your head down and keep trying, no matter what, we can find ways to make these things work. So I think my first priority would be rather than new construction and the expense of new brick and mortar, would really be figuring out how can we use what we have more efficiently and more intelligently for modern era education.
All right. A little tougher question here. We understand that you've aligned yourself with some activist groups with some partisan and fairly extreme philosophies, specifically Save Yakima and the Washington State Parents' Rights in Education. We also understand that you've signed the Yakima County Republican Liberty Caucus Compact. Is there a risk that you're bringing any sort of a partisan agenda to this position?
It's a very fair question. I would personally say no. I think for the people that I've worked with and the people that know me, I've been a Republican volunteer for the party and for candidates in the community ever since I was in middle school. So I would feel personally really disingenuous if I was not accepting those endorsements from people that I know and people that I've worked with and people that want to support me in this endeavor. Some of the online stuff, with Save Yakima and with the Facebook groups, I follow a handful of Facebook groups that have been talking about public education over the last year, and especially through the pandemic. And some of, one that you mentioned is a group that I honestly don't even know who runs it. It just showed up one morning and it had a list of people from around the state, and that's all fine and good. But our local groups, we have three main kind of factions within our Republican Party. We have mainstream Republicans of Washington, the local county central committee, and then the Republican Liberty Caucus. So those three cover the moderate to the conservative spectrum of the people that I've worked with over the years. And all three came to me and offered their endorsement, and I had no qualms with accepting it. The truth is, political action committees and political parties endorse candidates for nonpartisan offices all the time. It happens all around the state and all around the nation. I'm happy to accept endorsements from groups that want to support my candidacy, but I will always, be upfront and honest with people and tell them I'm a free thinker. And the difficulty of being endorsed by groups that range from a moderate to a conservative spectrum is that I'm probably going to disappoint at least one or two or three or all of them at some point in time or another. And that's a reality to a decision-making process. But I'm very comfortable with the endorsements that I've received, and very confident. If you look at the people who have endorsed me as individuals and the people who have supported my campaign financially, you'll find a wide variety of people from both public and private sector and from left and right on the political spectrum. So I feel pretty confident that I can represent myself in this position impartially.
John, can I follow up on that?
Sure.
Vanessa asked you just about kind of where you fall on the school district obviously is required to follow, kind of what comes out of the state in terms of health. If you are elected, how would you approach kind of the mask and vaccine direction that's coming down? Would you see yourself kind of doing what the state has required districts to do? Would you see yourself trying to make changes? How will you approach that issue?
Sure. I think that it's, without question, the scenario is one where the district needs to follow state guidelines, state law. And I would certainly speak up in areas when I maybe disagreed with it. But as far as, chaining myself to the high school front doors and blocking the barricades, no, that's not my style. There are opportunities where, we're looking at statewide guidance, and it's a huge state. We have large and small districts, and there's a lot of instances where what works in one area isn't necessarily going to be completely operable in another area. So I think there needs to be appropriate feedback in those situations. I would certainly be bringing a different perspective than the majority of the current board. So there would probably be maybe a different amount of conversation about some of those questions. But no, when it comes down to it, the district has an obligation to follow the law and adhere to state guidance, and I wouldn't be running contrary to that.
Okay. If you're elected, what would be your first priority?
Well, I think my first priority, of course, there's a huge learning curve. I recognize that, even as a parent and as somebody who's been involved in the district on some level over the years, there's a huge learning curve, and I would have to do everything I can to, bring myself up to speed as quickly as possible. So I think just my own personal education is part of that. I think that, we need to have a more pronounced impact in our community as far as positive PR, explaining to our community the things that are going on in our district and their buildings that are really exceptional and unique to our district. We need to sing our own praises louder and better than we've done in the past to improve the PR of the Yakima Public School District. I'd like to see a focus on that. And also, I think that one of the most fabulous opportunities and yet kind of scariest scenarios is the dual language program implementation. I think there's just incredible opportunity there. And as that is rolled out in some of the elementary schools, I think, we just as a board are going to have an obligation to really be paying attention to what's happening so that we can deal with the feedback, pro and con, in our community, and so that we can kind of help monitor that situation. It has one of the, I think, probably the largest opportunities for us to really increase, especially within literacy and with some of our basic academics. So that would probably be right up there. There's probably a few other things that are maybe of interest, but I think, all along what we've been saying is that we just need to kind of get back to basics and really focus on academic achievement. And rebuild what we can in areas where we've lost some ground during the pandemic.
Okay. Joanna, did you have anything to add, or?
I do. When we asked you the question about facilities, you mentioned the discussion taking place around, I guess some people call it a balanced calendar, or you might also call it year-round school. That obviously, if that comes up, and I know a couple of districts are testing that out right now in the Yakima Valley, that will be a big topic of conversation. How do you see the board navigating the community through that?
Well, I really like what has sort of been broached, I guess, a little bit through ESD 105 as far as having the discussion valley-wide to discuss, I don't know if it's Pollyanna-ish or not, but, the idea that you maybe could get multiple districts working off of the same calendar so that you can address some of the concerns that come up if you have employees in one district and their students in a neighboring district, how to make sure families' lives aren't disrupted by that calendar. So I think having that kind of an overall valley-wide approach is one of the best opportunities. It requires so much conversation, and it would require, you're talking about community forums and parent nights and, so much education to explain the pros and cons before the board could ever work on something like that. You have to have, so many stakeholders on the same page that I know it's been very, very difficult in the past to even have the conversation. But I look around the country and I see other regions where, the modified or balanced calendars work and seem to have a lot to offer. So I have to think that at the end of the day, if people are really looking at this from the perspective of what's best for kids, that we could at least have a really honest conversation about it. I would hope that could evolve, because I definitely feel like we are stuck in a 18th century agrarian calendar that just doesn't meet the needs of our kids today. But change is so hard, and there are so many different people that would have to be on the same page that it would be a big task. But I feel like the board could lead that opportunity with community conversation, with parent conversation, with the different unions that are involved, And if the, if the group, as a whole is committed to it, I think the opportunity is fantastic. But it has to be collaborative and ground up, because if it comes out from a top-down approach, I don't think it's going to get off the ground.
Is that it for you, Joanna?
It is.
Okay. Well, I think that's about all the questions we have. Anything you would like to add there, Mr. Beckett? Any kind of last comments, questions that you wish we might have asked or anything?
Oh, at the risk of looking desperate to get off of a recorded Zoom interview with the editorial board, no, I appreciate the questions. I know there's a lot that goes into this job. It's something I'm not taking lightly. And I am well aware of the fact that, it will take a lot of time and effort to learn everything you need to know to really be an effective and efficient board member. But I definitely feel like this is the right time in my life and in my family's life to be involved in the conversation about public education. And I'm certainly hoping I get the opportunity to do that.
Well, thanks again for taking the time to talk with us today. This has been the Yakima Herald-Republic's editorial board meeting featuring Ryan Beckett, who's seeking election to position 2 on the Yakima School Board. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.